Common sense ain't that common anymore. Seems common sense is past tense, just like the dinosaur. Political correctness has got a lot to answer for, 'cause common sense ain't that common anymore.
Now on weekends, the Treasury of Common Sense.
Leith Van Onselen from macrobusiness.com.au joins us every week for the Treasury of Common Sense. Good morning, my friend. Are you well?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Luke. How about yourself?
Yeah, just fine, mate. We're doing an outside broadcast today from Cabrevale Club Resort, and there's an official opening about to happen, so you might hear some noise in the background. Don't be put off. Don't be concerned. Don't be worried. It's meant to be that way. Let's hook in, because you make the outstanding point, and some would say, I guess, in part obvious point, that pensioners, and no one's compelling anyone to do anything, but older Australians could help solve labour shortages. Tell me more.
Yeah, 100%. So, like every other advanced country on earth, Australia's facing, obviously, pressures from an ageing population. And the federal government's tried to basically, mitigate these ageing pressures by running a gigantic immigration program, which I talk about almost every week. And the idea there is they want to bring in, people from overseas to fill labour shortages, to fill taxes, that sort of thing. And just this week, the Australian Bureau of Statistics released data on net permanent long-term arrivals. And that's kind of a leading indicator for net overseas migration. It doesn't match it one for one, but it's a sort of leading indicator. And it showed that over the first 9 months of this year, we received record numbers of net permanent long-term arrivals, and it's actually up by 6% on the same time last year. So this very high migration program that we've had for several years is ongoing. And former Senior Immigration Department bureaucrat Abel Rizvi, he put out some projections recently suggesting that Australia's net overseas migration is going to average 300,000 per year under current immigration settings. Now that means that we're going to have very, very strong immigration and population growth going forward, which is obviously going to add to housing pressures and all those sorts of things. And, I'd argue that this high immigration program's failed. So we've imported the wrong sorts of skills. We've got ongoing skills shortages. It hasn't changed in 20 years, even though we've grown the population aggressively by bringing in all these extra workers. Obviously got housing infrastructure shortages, rental crisis, all the stuff I always talk about. Now, here's my point, Luke. Rather than importing hundreds of thousands of people every year to solve labour shortages, a better solution would simply to use what we've got better and to utilise our age pension, retiree workforce better. So there was some research that was carried out by a mob called Retirement Essentials for the industry super fund HESTA. And they found that people who are working, who receive the age pension, they face an effective marginal tax rate of 77%. Now, what that means is,
yes,
because when you get the pension and then you work, every dollar you earn then reduces your pension. So effectively, what they found is, on average, for every dollar that these people earn, they lose 77 cents. Effectively, it's like a tax. And as a result, a whole bunch of pensioners don't want to work because there's no point. What's the point of putting in work when you only get, 23 cents for every dollar earned? Now, we don't have to look very far to see the alternative here. So across the pond in New Zealand, they have a universal pension system. So basically, it's not means tested. It means that anyone over the age of 65 receives the pension, whether or not you're rich or not, whatever. And what that's actually meant is that New Zealand has a very high labour force participation rate of over 65. So because they don't get penalised for working, they don't lose the pension, they have a lot more people working in New Zealand. It's significantly higher than Australia, like much higher. And so what I suggest is, instead of all Australia has to do to basically improve the situation is get rid of the income test for the age pension. So we've got two tests. We've got an assets test. So if you have too much assets, not including your house, but other stuff, you lose the age pension. So that's obviously if you're very rich, you don't get it, or, rich enough. But also we have an income test. So if you earn too much income, as I said, you then lose the pension if you work. Now, we should get rid of that second test, because by doing that, we then encourage Australian pensioners who want to work. They're not forcing you to work. You still get the pension. But if you want to work, and, I'd argue that for a lot of people, working is actually good for your mental health. It's good for your physical health. It's good for socialisation.
Of course.
It also means if you're, rather than trying to live on the pension, which is not a lot of money, you could then supplement that income, and then simply the Australian government could collect tax on your total income. So you make the tax-free threshold for those people effectively the age pension, and then anything above that you get taxed. But you get taxed at normal rates. And by doing this, Australia could massively boost its workforce. It could plug these labour shortages. A lot of people who are sort of 60 to 70 are very skilled. They've had a lifetime of work. They're still able-bodied. They offer a hell of a lot of benefits to the nation, to the economy. They have, unbelievable amount of skills that we should be utilising. And why aren't we letting these people work? Why are we discouraging them from working by effectively penalising them for doing so? And the National Seniors Australia, they put out some research, and they found that only about 3% of age pensioners currently work in Australia, which is ridiculously low level. And they estimate that if you simply exempt work income from the age pension, if you get rid of the age pension income test, the means test, you could benefit up to 2 million pensioners who might start working, and you could see, say, 400,000 critical labour shortages filled across the country by just simply using our existing workforce, older Australians better. It's a win for them. They'll be able to earn more money, have a better lifestyle in retirement. It's a win for the economy because we plug these labour shortages. It means you wouldn't have to run such an absurdly high immigration program trying to fill these spots, which then takes pressure off the housing market, the rental market, infrastructure, all those sorts of things. And you just get more efficiency in general across the economy because efficiency is all about using what you have better. Right? It's a quality. It's a quality game, not a quantity game. It's just a no-brainer, and I think this is a policy area where it's a very simple win. It's not going to cost the budget a lot of money. Yes, they'll have to pay a little bit more in age pension, but they'll get a lot of that back in taxes. And they won't have to spend. Well,
the point to make here is, no, of course, and this was an issue I think in the dying days of the former Morrison government, and it appeared as though both sides of politics were about to take it seriously. And this is why, by the way, we call this the Treasury of Common Sense, because everything that comes out of Leith's mouth is basically common sense. Why wouldn't you do this? And I think of all the statistics, mate, it's stunning. 25% of New Zealand's workforce are over 65. Now, again, I feel like I've got to make the point. No one's saying you must work, but the option should be there. And there's so much disincentive. And as one of my texters says, mate, we imported 1 million Uber drivers. Now we need to import 500,000 builders. I mean, it's lunacy, as you say. You may do with what you've got, or you use it better. This is a perfect example. It baffles me. You and I talk through these things each week. It baffles me why these aren't front and centre conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So Australia's playing skills shortage whack-a-mole, right? So we import a whole bunch of people who often don't work in the areas that they're purported to be skilled in. So then they end up working, these other jobs like Ubers or whatever. And then we create shortages in other areas like builders. Suddenly we don't have enough nurses because we've got a much bigger population. You need more nurses. We don't have enough teachers for the same reason. So then the solutions, we'll import more nurses and teachers and then builders, but then you create problems in other areas. So instead of just trying to play this, rat wheel, just chasing your tail, dog chasing its tail, better off just to significantly cut the immigration program, make it just very skilled as much as you can, and then just use the resources we've got, because we've got this massive pool of, especially with the baby boomers retiring, we've got a huge pool of untapped labour resources that we're basically penalising for working. Well, how about we take away those penalties and then they'll end up working. It's good for them, it's good for the nation, it's good for everyone.
Now, we've got a champion this week, mate, but you're pulling my leg, right?
I am. Look, this is a very strong sarcasm alert, right? So I'm doing a bit differently this week. It's a little bit of satire, but the champion is the Australian housing market. So the housing market hit a new milestone in October, according to Cotality. It reached an all-time high valuation of $12 trillion. So what that means is that every single home across the nation is now valued at $12 trillion. Now, to put that into perspective, 9 years ago it was $6 trillion. So it's doubled in 9 years. And what that means is that if you spread that across the number of homes we've got in the country, Every single home in the country, when you average it out, is worth $1,053,000 per home. It's insane how expensive this is becoming. And if you actually divide it by the current population, so I've got the population clock from the ABS, which gives you like a run-in estimate, it means that our housing stock is now worth $431,400 per person in Australia. Now, this is the reason why Australia ranks number 2 in the world on household wealth. And I saw one of the RBA boffins was boasting that Australia's got the second highest wealth. Well, this is why, because we've got expensive housing. We've got one of the most expensive housing markets in the world, and it just keeps rising. Now, I'd argue that this is actually not good. It's actually fake wealth. I'm being sarcastic. We've got a champion housing market that's so expensive, but it's actually not a good thing. And here's the thing. So, independent economist Jerry Minack, he calculated that Australia's total residential land value, so land basically makes up 75% of our housing values, so it's the driver, and it's valued at 3.2 times the nation's annual GDP. Now, that is on par with what Japan's was at the peak of the late 1980s great land bubble of Japan. So our housing value compared to our economy is on par with what Japan was in the late 80s, which was one of the biggest ever land bubbles in the world. So if Japan's housing market was a giant bubble in the late 80s, well, what does that mean for Australia now? And in all seriousness, this is not, I said we're a champion, we're actually clowns, really, if you put it down to it. Having such expensive housing is not something to boast about. It's actually very bad. What it's meant is it's meant that our banks now lend 2/3 to mortgages instead of lending to businesses. It's made it a lot harder if you're young and you're trying to get into the housing market. I'd argue that we'd actually be a wealthier country if our average home was worth $525,000, not $1,050,000, and we're carrying average household debt was 90% of our income, not 180% of our income. And if you go back in 1991 during the census, Australia's home ownership rate was actually 5% higher than it is now, and our homes are only valued at 3 times average household incomes back in 1991. They're now 8 times incomes now. So I'd actually argue that we were actually wealthier back in 1991, really, when you think about it, in a quality of life sense and in a structural sense, we're wealthier. Yeah. But because we've got such expensive housing worth $12 trillion, we're now ranked as the second wealthiest households in the world. So there you go, Australia, a silver medal to us.
Well done you. Thanks, mate. Outstanding today. Outstanding. Well, outstanding every weekend. Leith Van Onselen, macrobusiness.com.au.